Hey everyone, Jeff Simon here for SocialFlight with another cool building stage on our Titan T-51D Mustang. And today we are going to work on something that is truly cool, the canopy crank mechanism. Everything that makes this canopy actually open and close with the crank in the cockpit. I love it when I get to work on something truly mechanical, where at the end of it I can actually work a mechanism and see how it's going to work when we're actually flying this airplane. Now, in previous videos you've seen that we completed the canopy and it slides open and closed really nicely and smoothly along these tracks. The way that it works, we have these aluminum tracks, as I mentioned, and then there are nylon followers, kind of guides, that ride in those tracks for left and right. And you basically have two hard points here at the bottom of the forward edge of the canopy, and this is where we are going to actually pull and push from to close and open the canopy in service. Now, the way that this is done is very interesting. You use a small, it's like a bicycle chain, but it's much smaller, and that chain gets attached to the forward edge of this, which actually pulls the canopy closed. It goes from here to the crank. Now, the crank mechanism here has a gear inside of it that meshes with the chain, and that allows you to pull it closed or go in the opposite direction and push it open as well. And now you only really need the chain for the length that it's going to need to close and open. So you go to the full aft position, you need the chain length that goes from here to forward and wrapping around the actual gear, and then over to the closed position like that, and back. So you need that length of chain. Now, as you can imagine, if you're only pulling from one side of the canopy, it's going to get a little bit cockeyed, and really it can be very difficult to open and close. But you want it to close and open as smoothly as possible. So to do that, Titan has a really cool solution. They actually use a cable setup that evenly pulls from the opposite side at the exact same time as the side that the crank is pulling from. Now, it may be a little bit confusing about how that would work, so let me explain that. So as I mentioned, you've got a chain that we will install from here across the actual crank and then down in below the channel. Now, at that point, when you think of it, when we're closing the canopy like this, we're actually pulling from the back, right? And so they attach a cable from the back of this where you get that pulling motion, and you kind of go in an X. You bring it all the way around the cabin, down, and then around through a pulley this way, so that while you're pulling from the back, you're also pulling this side symmetrically. It's really, really cool. And then the exact same thing works the other direction. We have a cable at the back of this for when you're opening it. That goes back that way, comes around, and attaches to the bottom part of what we're doing here with our chain. So it can be a little bit confusing, but essentially the top of this one turns into the bottom over here and vice versa. That is what actually makes it pull when you're doing this. So one action causes the equal and opposite reaction. It is very, very cool. Can't wait to get to work on that. And the last part of it is the crank handle itself. And the crank handle is cool because you actually push a button which releases a latch. And you can kind of see over here, you have all these slots like in a star pattern going around this bracket. That is where the actual handle locks into place. Like you push it, you can hear that click. That's how that actually clicked into place. And if you push the button, it releases, and then there's a button correspondingly on the outside here, on the outside skin. Push that button, it releases, you can move the canopy. Very, very cool mechanism. So it's time to get to work on this. Now, it is going to be a little bit difficult doing this like all one person, making all this happen. Since the boys aren't here, I've got a little bit of help again. As you can imagine, my friend here is going to help us out. Hey, Otto. What are you going to do? So Otto will help us out on our project, and Otto, get out of my way. All right, and then we'll see you as we get to work on another build stage of our Titan T-51D Mustang. All right, Otto, time for us to get to work. Come on, move, man. That's all we got. Go away. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a minute to look at the canopy crank mechanism and how it works, because it is very, very cool. It all starts right here with this beautifully machined knob, which is what you're going to spend most of your time holding in the cockpit when you're opening and closing the canopy. And as you can see, there is this lever or button that exists on this. It goes through this pivot point that you can see here, and it pushes a shaft inside that is spring-loaded. So as you go and you push this down, what that shaft does is it pushes this next arm, which also has a pivot point, and what it does is it actually pulls away this locking tab. So you can see the locking tab is on an arm with a fulcrum, and it's pushed by the pin that comes out, and it's a very, very simple mechanism. But what that locking tab does is it grabs one of the slots in this. So this is actually mounted against the side wall of the compartment in the cockpit. This actually is rotating in an arc through it, and then when you get to one of the slots in here, that tab engages. You can't move it back and forth. You pull that, or you push the button that's on the knob. It releases. You can turn it to your heart's content, and that's what opens and closes the canopy. Now that's great, but it only works when you're inside the cockpit. So what happens when you're outside the cockpit? Well, it's very cool, because what you have there, and I didn't show before, is as you go, as you're pushing on that and you're releasing the tab, if you go further in, you get to this point first. This is the gear which is engaged and then turns the chain and pulls the canopy closed or open. But there's also this red button. And when you push this red button, it performs the same function as before. You do that and you can see that latching mechanism pull away or extend into place. Let me get myself out of that so you can see that. There you go. You can see it pulling and releasing like that with the button. And that way outside, you can just push the button and then you can pull the canopy open or you can push the canopy shut. It's a very, very cool mechanism. And that is how we open and close the canopy on our Titan Mustang. So now let's get to work installing it. Okay, I've removed the canopy so that we have better access to the canopy tracks and we can get the mechanism installed. Now, let me walk you through this. We already talked about the forward side of this canopy track right here, because that's essentially where the mechanism is that we crank. So that's pretty straightforward. That's going to be left open. Now, when we get to the aft edge, you can't really see it here. It's on the opposite side. But the aft edge of this canopy is where it needs to transition into the cabling. And the way that's done is we use this small piece here. It's got a piece that goes and wedges into place in the canopy track. And then you have two holes outside of it. The top hole here is milled so that here's a piece of it here. This is all coiled. But it's so that the sheath of the cable, as you can see right here, can slide into place and serve as kind of a backstop for that. And then the cable itself goes inside the sheath from this point back and around the canopy. So that's pretty straightforward. On the bottom edge of that, what we do is it's threaded, and we have this piece which threads into place in the back and then has a similar section that holds in another section of that black sheathing. The purpose of having it threaded is that allows some adjustment. It's very important that we can adjust that in and out so that we can control the tension and do the alignment that needs to happen on the canopy itself. So that's the piece that's going to go in the aft edge of this one. Now, as we get around to the other side, you can see another part of that right there. That's the aft edge of the left side of the canopy. And if, in fact, I can kind of bring this in so you can actually see that. Let me zoom that in for you. And so that's this section right here that you can see right over here. And that's where we are going to put another one of those that's going to it's going to kind of get hammered into place. It takes a little pressure to get that in, but that's going to go in that part, and that's where you get the rest of that coming in. And then when we get to the forward edge of the opposite side, which is right there, that's where we need to turn all of this around. Essentially, that is our U-turn for the cable mechanism. And to make that work, we have this piece right here. This piece has a cutout in here, and this pulley that you can see right here goes into place inside. It has a very small ridge on it. There you go. A little hard to see. But one side has a ridge. You put that in here, and then this is going to serve for the cable to come in, go around, and back out. And that gets put into place like that, which protects the cable. I can't really do that right now because I can't tap it into place for you. But essentially, it's going to be right in place there. That gets pushed in, and that is how the cable works. So that gives us our U-turn that effectively happens. So again, we're going to go on this side here. It's going to be a chain for a while until it gets to one of these sliders down this side. And then it's going to attach, the chain's going to attach there. The aft edge of this is going to be a cable. The cable's going to come back to the end. And again, the cable on the other side of the chain comes back, and then we convert it, as we talked about there. Actually converts like that over back to two cables. Two cables come all the way around, and then they do the reverse on the other side. A little bit complicated, but you're going to see me put it together now, and I think it's all going to make sense. So let's get to work putting it in now. Okay, these little pieces that you see here, this little nylon piece, and it's got a bolt in it. I've got some washers on it at the moment. This is what goes into the track and slides back and forth. These are those guides that go into the left and right track and control the canopy forward edge. Now, if you look really closely at it, you can see here, sorry, it's a little tough with the light, but you can see here there are two sections that are made for the chain to attach. And that's right here and right here. And you can attach a chain, you can attach cabling, whatever you want to. What I'm going to do is use these small connectors, and this is very hard to see, but when you talk about like something like a bicycle chain, there's an easy way and a hard way to actually deal with the end of it. And the easy way, as I almost dropped that, is to use these kind of chain connectors, these half links basically, that go on the end. And then what you do is you slide over it another end piece of chain, which you can sort of see there. That's a better way of showing that to you. And then there is a very small lock that goes into place. And I'll see if you can see that also. That little lock that snaps into place and turns it into a complete chain link. Well, the purpose of doing all of this now is that, first of all, those guides have to be in place before we put in both the ends, because it basically gets captured and then it can't slide out. Now, when I grab it again here and I show you, one of the things that I can do is I can put that kind of half link chain piece in at that point, so you can see it. That's it at the back, and then that's it at the front. And if it's in place first as I put it in, well, then it's really simple because I've got whatever I need to attach things to after the fact. So I put in all of these on both ends all the way around. So 4 of them are going to go on, and then I'm all set later to come back and attach the cable or chain, whichever has to be attached to whichever side of it. So very straightforward. I'm going to put 4 of those on, 2 on each one of these guides, and then I'm going to put those into place in the left and right track, and then I can hammer in those end pieces that I just showed you. I'm not even hitting it that hard, so it's really not marring it. but those little tight taps I think are working better than a softer mallet hit, which really wasn't moving it, but the lighter, sharper hits of using just a regular hammer are protecting everything around it, but actually moving it in quite nicely. And that's it. All right, that one's in place. One more to go. All right, so now it is time for us to put in the cable sheathing that goes along the back here of our cockpit. And this is it. Looks just like this. It's a black 6mm cable sheathing. And as you can kind of see, it's got a nice Teflon liner that's in there. Now, what we need to do, there's a little gap in here in this part of the aft canopy track that allows us to put it through. So what I need to do is size it and cut it and make it into shape. And as you can see, it goes across here and then is going to fit into the receptacle here in the track. And these, as we mentioned earlier, crisscross. And what I mean by that is that the bottom here becomes the top on this side and vice versa. That way, when the canopy is closing and we're pulling a cable here, well, we're going to the bottom, up around there, and pulling the front there. So we talked about that before. Now, I'm basically just going to size this so that it can fit up into here. And I'm going to use these square adhesive, these are high quality, really good ones, square adhesive zip tie things that are going to allow me to put this into place, and then it can hold it up so when we put things on the hatch shelf in the future, and they're not, it's not going to like hit the cables or anything like that. So let me create the two pieces that are going to go in here. I'll attach these first, slide it all through, and then we can get on to running the cable itself. Gonna leave these and trim these later since I'm gonna get them all cinched up after we do the cable. Now it's time to move on to the cable. Okay, so now what I've done here is I've set the sliders for the canopy even on both sides and just clamp them into place. That way I know I'm gonna do, everything's gonna be pretty much in alignment or as close as I can get. So as far as staggering the cables for the when I get it all set up. And so I've run this through the inside here where there's a little pulley. I already ran it through in there. And now what we're going to do is we have to actually attach it to the front of this cable guide. And so in an earlier video, we went and already attached, or I already showed you how we attach to the little kind of like bike chain pieces that are in there. And to do that, we need to go and loop this around, and the cable, this is 1/16 inch wire rope cable. And to do that, we're going to put it into a little crimp ferrule that it goes into there. And so I've already installed one and kind of preset it into place in this crimping tool. This is a crimping tool I like to use on these types of ferrules. So if you look closely in there, you can see the other two are hollow, but the smallest size has the actual little crimp right in there. And so since this is free, all I need to do is put it through here and then loop it back on itself. And I really want this to be as small as possible with just a tiny little tail. That's just enough for safety purposes, because the size of the loop here is going to get in the way, if I'm not careful, of like running in this slot. So you really don't want to have a big loop, and the bike chain that we're, the place we're attaching it to on the chain is very, very small. So that's not going to be much of an issue or much of a concern in that regard. And so I'm going to set this up. We'll see if I can show it to you, because it's going to be very tight. See if I can do this. Okay, let's see if you can see that. That's the loop. So it's a very small loop that I'm setting up here, but it's enough to go through the ferrule, and so it'll have a good crimp and still give me, you know, what I'm hoping to get out of this, of being able to clamp and grab the bike chain attachment point. So to crimp this down, we just tighten alternately these two bolts on this. It's actually very straightforward, very simple tool to use. I like this because of that, because of how simple it is. And then as I get closer in of holding this, I can, before it actually crimps on itself too much, I can refine how I want the clamping force to happen. So let me hold that. And that is exactly what I was hoping for. Nice crimp, nice small loop. It's got a tail at the end just to make sure that everything fits right. And forgot it, I'll go grab it, but there's a go, no go gauge that you can use on these to make sure that it worked right. And so that's the go, no go, and it is a go. It worked. Perfect. And we're all set. Now we can attach it. And now what I have to do is finish off that chain piece. It's hard to see behind the clamp, but there's another, obviously, pin. I think I did it. All right. I think I did it. Look at that. Clip is there. Okay, so that is one of the cables, but for the other cable we need to actually be able to put the chain on. So to do that, we're going to attach the chain. So let me get back in frame. So to do that, we're going to attach the chain to the front part of this, go over the cog that's in the crank you see over here, and then back. And we have to have the lengths as such that it can actually have enough to crank forward, have enough to crank back. So we have to change where our setting is in order to make that happen. And I'm going to do that now. All right, this is our chain. I'll give you a close-up of it in a little bit. But very straightforward. And the chain, if you've ever worked with a bike chain, you know that you can change the lengths of them and things like that. So it is very straightforward because I already installed the half link, the little link attachment, so I can go and stick it on that and see that that's where I've got there. And now I can run it here over this front pulley. Down here. I'm going to give you a close-up view of that. There we go. So I'm going to mark one of these right here. Okay, so I've marked that, and now I'm going to do something called breaking the chain. I'm going to put this tool on it. It's going to grab it right where I wanted it to grab it. Now I'm just going to turn this in. And all we're going to do is basically punch out one of the pins. And this tool is really cheap. on Amazon. There's nothing special to it. And it's off. All right, so last step is this last cable that we have to attach here and make the whole system work. So that comes in this way to here, and we have to put some tension on to figure out where exactly that needs to go. So I'm gonna create my loop. This tool works so well, so easy. Okay, check it with my gauge. Good. And now I'm going to trim the excess off. Looks like I've got it. I'm using this screwdriver just to pull this out. I'm going to zoom the camera in so you can see these last steps. All right, I think that did it. All right, now that the tracks are in place and the cable and the chain and everything is all set there, the only thing that we need to do is the adjustments, and then we'll do the final drilling for where the bracket goes that locks things in. One of the tricks here, of course, is that there's only a certain number of indexes for that crank to lock into place. Now I want it to put some pressure on this seal and then click into place. And I'm going to have to do some adjustments to make that happen. So let's start by putting the canopy back on, and then we can start doing some adjustments. All right, I've got the canopy back in place now, and you know, it took quite a bit of adjusting back and forth to get the canopy even on both sides, get the tension right, but in the end, it works, and it works so nicely. I can just grab it right here and crank the canopy shut. And it's nice, tight, and secure. You can even hear the echo probably in my mic. Very, very, very exciting. Well, that's it for another cool building stage on our Titan T-51D Mustang. Be sure to check out SocialFlight.com and the free mobile apps for Apple and Android devices. We have tens of thousands of aviation events, destinations, our Fly to Win challenge where we're giving away tons of prizes. Just so much going on. And every Tuesday night, we have our SocialFlight live show with amazing guests. And every once in a while, we also have our monthly Cockpit to Cowl show with Brian Schiff and I, where we talk about both the perspective of mechanic and flight instructor and commercial pilot. It's just another great show. You should check that out at cockpit2cowl.com with the number 2. Until next time, I'm Jeff Simon for SocialFlight, and I wish you all blue skies.